Hello everyone. So today's video is going to be a little longer, and it's a topic that sort of comes up quite often. It's something that people often ask for help with and advice with, and that is just simply developing ideas. Okay, so just simply coming up with creative ideas and expanding out on what you've been given. Okay. And one of the sort of big headaches here, really, I think basically comes from the fact that we get stuck in this idea that we're doing functional skills, that this is functional, that this is grounded in reality. And it absolutely is. But you do still need to be creative. And if you think about the amount of TV shows or books and what have you that are set in reality, they're set either in our world or a world very like ours. I don't know, procedural cop dramas, for instance, or I don't know, things like EastEnders as well. You know, I mean, it's a fictional East End of London, but it's still supposed to be East London. Even though that is very much grounded in reality, well, I say grounded in reality, it's certainly supposed to be. The writers still have to come up with ideas. They still have to come up with things like that. So we do need to employ a bit of creativity here, and hopefully today's video is going to give you some tools to manage that and tools to sort of, well, develop your ideas a bit and develop that creative instinct. And what I want to focus on really is thinking about the types of thing they may ask us to write about, how to go from being given a topic to coming up with ideas, and what we can do to prepare for that. And one thing I want to look at is world building, and I'm going to get onto that in a second. Firstly, though, let's have a quick look here at some of the tasks they may ask us to do. And remember, we're going to think about the actual topics. Okay, so here we are. So the first one here is from level 2. Doesn't really matter whether it's level 1 or level 2 because we're looking at the topics. And the topic here is workplace. It's something to do with the workplace. And you're being asked to write a blog. Again, we don't need to worry about exactly what you're being asked to write because we cover that in different videos, as well as things like how to use the appropriate tone, etc., etc., etc. So we're just thinking about the topics here. So the topic here is to do with work placements. This might be required by a college, perhaps. I mean, it's saying about young people preparing for work experience. So it's probably a college has asked you to do this based on 2 work placements. And again, this is going to be something familiar. Everybody has an idea of what work is, what a career is, you know, what people might do for a living. So this is something that is going to be familiar. And a lot of these topics are work related. Okay. So in this instance, we're going to have to develop ideas for 2 different work placements. Okay. If we have a look at this one here, we're being asked to give our opinion. And the thing I want you to note here is it's for a student magazine. Now, bear in mind, most of the people doing functional skills are doing so at college. So the assumption is that these articles, these tasks are very much written with college students in mind, you know. So we've been asked to give our opinion. And again, this is our opinion on something that's that we all know something about. I don't particularly follow celebrity culture myself, but I still have an opinion on that line between, you know, celebrities having the right to their own privacy versus you know, the press's right to report on these things, especially as these are people in the public eye. And they even give us some little handy bullet points here to help us out. Okay. So again, we're looking at a topic that is going to be something you know something about. It's couched in this idea of a student magazine. So again, we want to bear that in mind, that a lot of these tasks are sort of designed with college students in mind. Now, moving on to this here, we're being asked to write a letter of complaint, and it's about a product that's been purchased. And it's, again, this is a very real world sort of thing. You know, you've gone somewhere, you've bought something, it's not working properly, then there's a problem when you try and get it fixed. So again, functional, but we still haven't developed these ideas. And again, we can be fairly sure that most people know what a computer is. And to be honest, the task itself isn't expecting you to go into a great deal of technical detail here. It says what is wrong with the computer. That could easily be, well, it just won't turn on anymore. That's fine. Okay. And again, so we've got a topic that's familiar, it's every day. We've got a situation here where you know, whatever world this exists in, whatever world the exams exist in, they've got computer shops. It looks very much like our own world. So those are the ideas that we're dealing with this one. Other letters of complaint they might ask you to write about are also going to be very grounded in reality. You might be writing to the council to complain about bin collections. You might be writing to a company to complain about the construction work that's going on near you. Okay, so it's going to be stuff that's really grounded in reality. That's the key thing to remember here. So this next one here, we're being asked to write a report, and it's a health and safety report. So health and safety hazards. And they even give us these hazards. Okay, so they've told us these, and we're expected to explain why we're writing, what we've seen, the location of each hazard, what the possible dangers are, and how each hazard could be corrected. And this ties in quite neatly to what I'm going to be talking about in a little while, because this is all about what you're being asked to do here, really, is almost invent a workplace from scratch. Obviously, you could absolutely use one of your own, but what if it doesn't quite fit? So what we're going to be looking at in a little bit is just world building. So how to sort of come up with a scenario, with a place in your head where these things can happen. Okay. Yeah, that's it for that one. And finally, this is another fairly common one, really. And you're being asked to email someone, and you can see here this is an informal email, and you can ask to write an email to a friend. Asking for help. And again, you might see these ones. It might be an email to ask for help from a friend. It might be a letter to ask for help from a business. And then maybe running some sort of charity event or something like that. So there we go. I am just going to stop screen sharing this in a second. Okay, and just to let you know, I will be emailing out these slides as well. Okay, so I've subdivided this into different sections. And again, I'm not talking today about how you'd structure these. That's in a different video. I'm not talking about what kind of language you'd use. Again, that is in a different video. What I'm concentrating on here is how you develop those ideas, how you start to think about the kinds of topics they might ask. Okay. So for letters and emails, we've got things like requesting help, complaining, and potentially giving your opinion on the topic. With articles and blogs, it's going to be giving your opinion. It might be describing something. Reports and reviews, you might be reporting on an event. So for instance, you might go to a store and report on the cleanliness of it, or you might be reporting on potential accidents or a real accident that's happened. And with a review, you might be reviewing an attraction, a restaurant, a cafe, something like that. And for narratives, it will tend to be things like giving an account of an event, so sort of explaining what happened, maybe to, I don't know, the police or something like that, or maybe you're writing it up for a local paper or something like that, like a festival or something. Or you might be describing a story, and again, it will be something you are familiar with, it will be something you've had experience of. So yeah, the topics, they're going to be linked to work and life. This is going to be stuff that wouldn't be unusual to find in real life. And it can't be stuff either that's requiring a lot of previous knowledge. And I've talked about this before. Basically, they're testing your English skills, and they're testing your functional English skills as well. So they are interested in your ability to use English every day. So they're not going to throw things at you. They're not going to ask you to write a report on the fine details of nuclear energy, because that would be unreasonable to expect you to know about. They're not going to ask you to write a newspaper article on the causes of the French Revolution, because again, that would be very unreasonable to ask you to sort of write about. How would you know that? I wouldn't be able to know that myself, really, off the top of my head. They're going to ask you things like, if they ask you a topic, it's going to be something very sort of general. So, for instance, they might ask you your opinion on global warming, or pick out an element of global warming we're familiar with, like, I don't know, travel or recycling, and talk about that. Okay. The other, sort of the other angles they could take is stuff that is very functional, very much to do with work. So you might be asking for assistance from a friend or a co-worker, for instance, or you might be requesting information or permission from a manager, or you might be emailing. You might, the scenario might be you work for one company and you happen to email another company about something. And these will be straightforward things. They're not going to be anything out of the blue, right? So it might say, for instance, that you work for a charity, quite a popular one, and do sort of have a charity in mind. And I'll get onto that when we get into the world building. But do have a charity in mind when you go in, because it's quite common. They might ask you to write something either from a charity or to a charity. That does seem very popular. Reviews of places in town. They're not going to ask you to review anything completely out there. It'll be things like restaurants, cafes, days out, that sort of thing. It might also be something civic. So it might be something to do with your local area. So it might be a park that needs renovating. It might be something to do with the local school. Maybe the local school is having a fun day and they want you to sort of help promote it. If it's something, well, if it's some sort of opinion for an article or something like that, it might also be about a person. So it's not a bad idea to have, I don't know, a hero or a teacher or someone who influenced you stuck in your head before you go in and some details about them. And again, do remember here you can make stuff up a little bit. Don't make it completely unrealistic. Don't claim that your granny was the first woman in space. Well, unless you are actually descended from the first woman in space, of course. But don't make up stuff like that. They want it to be somewhat grounded in reality. Okay. So there we go. And here are some of the possible topics that I sort of brainstormed earlier. So it could be complaints about products that you bought or a service. It could be a review of some place in the town, an opinion on something global, for example, climate change, or it could also be a sort of an opinion on what you could do to change things in the world. It could be describing someone who influenced you, a hero or a teacher that really helped you. They may also ask you to describe a story from fiction you're familiar with. So again, it might be a good idea just before the exam, have a bit of a think about that. You know, if they do spring that question on you, you know, which piece of fiction, which movie, which TV show could you talk about? It could be asking for assistance from a friend or a co-worker, and that could be potentially something work-based. But again, it will be fairly generically work-based. So it might be, for instance, I don't know, you're asked to ask for assistance because you work at a nursery and you need to swap shifts with someone. It might be reporting on something at work. And again, that would probably be things like, I don't know, cleanliness, hygiene, health and safety, fire hazards, that sort of thing. Things we're broadly familiar with. And yeah, that's about it. Or again, like I said, it might be something to do with local area, something civic, like cleaning up a park or helping out a charity event, or potentially the council might be thinking about demolishing some old building and replacing it with flats. Those sorts of things that sort of pop up, say in the local newspaper or that sort of thing. So what we're going to look at next is world building and how we can sort of create almost like our own little town where these things happen in. So what is world building? So world building it's something that a lot of writers use. It's something that a lot of you know, if you're into it, people who make video games sort of do this as well. Basically, the idea is that you create a fictional world where your stuff, your story happens in. So, for instance, to use an example that's very, very popular, if we're thinking about Harry Potter and J.K. Rowling, at some point she would have sat down and thought, okay, so what does Hogwarts look like? What goes on here? How does this world that I'm writing a story in work? Now, obviously, we're not writing fiction here, or at least not in the sense that I mean when I say fiction or we talk about Harry Potter or something like that. We are writing about a world that already broadly exists. We're writing about our world. We're sort of developing a very similar copy to maybe our local town, and that's a really good starting place. Okay. And basically, how it works is it sort of sparks creativity. Okay, it's a way of practicing being creative first and foremost. Okay, it's a way of sitting down and thinking about the overall stuff, like what might you find in an average market town in England, you know. But when you start doing that, you start thinking about other little details, and you're just sort of getting into that mindset, and you're practicing those skills that you will need in the exam. Obviously, this is something you are going to do before the exam. It's not something you're going to do in the exam. I just want to state that. This is something you do before the exam. So in your head, before you go in, you've got your own little town where the stuff in the exam happens, you know? So to go back to our example of a laptop, you buy a computer from a shop and it's broken. If I've done a bit of world building, if I've sort of imagined my little town where this is going to be happening, I can already almost picture it in my head. I can picture a little shop on the high street that sells computers. It's part of a chain. Okay, fair enough. So it's basically a way of creating a place where these texts happen, where these issues that we're being asked to write about happen. And I'm going to show you one that I made earlier, just to show you what I mean. Now, you don't have to do what I did. I mean, I am not an artist. I've just done a really basic map here. This is because I'm quite a visual thinker, right? I like stuff in front of me. I like maps and I like spreadsheets and diagrams and whatnot. You might decide to just have bullet point lists, and that's absolutely fine. It's who you are. And you can see I've already started to fill it out. So I'm calling it Any Town. I'll probably rename that at some point. That's not important, but I've already started to build it. So my town has got a high street here. And I think we're going to put a computer shop there. And let's have a charity shop. And I'm going to go scope. And that's handy because if I get a task where I'm asked to write as if I'm working for a charity shop, that's my charity shop. Scope. I already know about Scope. I'll do some research. It's a charity I'm familiar with, so I know about it. And that gives me a cushion, There's already stuff that I don't have to do in the exam. There's already ideas that I don't have to come up with in the exam before I want to come to the exam. And that's what we want to do here. I've also put a college over here because, as I said, a lot of these tasks are written with the idea of college students in mind, basically. Nice little green area here, so we can have a park. And let's put a little school in next to it as well. I think it'd be quite nice for kids, won't it? Something like that. Park school. And thinking about it, they could easily ask something about ambulances. They might ask about local hospitals. That's been in the news a lot lately. Near where I live, sort of like hospitals potentially downsizing, maybe not getting quite the ratings they should have. The NHS is very much in people's minds at the moment. I wouldn't be surprised if it's in examiners' minds at the moment. So there might be something to do with hospitals. So I'm going to put a little hospital up here. And I'm just going to sort of develop it out. Over here on the edge of town, I'm going to have wasteland. Maybe they're being knocked down. Maybe I'll get a task where I'm asked to write about a new housing development. Maybe that's when new housing development is being built. And if I get into the exam and I've got this picture in my head, I've got this little town in my head that I've been working on, I've been developing, and the task is quite specific. It says that this new housing development is being built on green space. I might put in my head, I'll just shift it. It's no longer post-industrial wasteland. It's now green space. Okay, I'm going to write about that. So that's basically the key to it. And you can be fairly detailed here if you want. You can take quite a lot of time doing this. You can draw around little maps, and that's absolutely fine. And it's basically just this sort of world building activity you might find really helpful because it gives you a cushion. Okay. We know that they will ask us something to do, something very relevant with our lives, whether that's work, whether that is college, whether that is home, or whatever. Okay. If it's a global thing, it's going to be something we're all familiar with anyway. So by building this little market town that looks very, very much like a sort of standard market town, really, in our heads at least. Okay, it isn't great. Like I said, I'm not an artist. What we're doing is we're giving ourselves a head start. There's already a place where these tasks can happen in. And hopefully you'll find that really helpful in terms of coming up with new ideas in the exam. And also just in general, really, when you're sort of being asked to write about this sort of stuff, these in class or in the exam. So there we go. So just to sort of recap here, what we're looking at so far. So we've thought about the sort of topics they might ask to write about. And those are going to be topics to do with everyday life. It's functional skills, so it's going to be work, it's going to be home life, it might be civic stuff as well, so stuff in society around us. Could be the public transport, for instance, or local council or local schools, or a charity. how do we go from being given a topic to coming up with ideas? Well, I'll tackle this a bit in a different video that we were planning, but broadly speaking, we did have a bit of a think about that. And a lot of it's to do with just having that cushion in place, that sort of world that we built, that little town that we can sort of picture in our heads, you know? And you, like I said, the town can be as vague or as detailed as you like. If you really get into it, you can even come up with people to populate it, you know? That's absolutely fine. But basically, the idea is you are going in there in your head an idea of this town that exists where these tasks in the exam happen. You know, you've got a town where people go into the computer shop, computer breaks, then you get repaired. It's in your head. You don't need to sort of imagine it in the exam because you've already been imagining it. You've got a local college where you know the fictional version of you that's writing this goes. And you've already started thinking about that college. You've probably already started, and you'll naturally start thinking about it as well. As you sort of world building, you'll naturally start thinking about it as well. You think, well, what sort of courses might I do? You know, how far away is it from the city centre? And yeah, there we go. That is basically some ideas, some tools that I hope you will find useful when it comes to developing ideas in the exam. Don't forget, like anything else, creativity like this, it gets better with practice. Okay. So hopefully you found that useful today. And like I said, I will email out these slides to you guys as well.